Hello, good morning and welcome back to our final day of Real Estate Live UK's first week of events in 2021. The programme, brought to you by White Label and our partners, has had a fantastic week of promoting places and creating conversations across the property and related sectors. And you can view more details about the week of events we've had, watch back any sessions that you've missed, and find out more about what's coming up next time on our website, realestatelive.co.uk. And I'll let you know about some of what else is coming up for the rest of the day, our final day at the end of this session. Before we begin this morning's event, to kickstart your audience engagement, we will be launching a poll asking what will be the most significant trend for regeneration professionals in 2021. Big question. A few options will be appearing on your screen now, so please take your time to read through those and submit your answers. And while you're doing that, I'm delighted to introduce our next panel looking at the future of construction in partnership with Herts IQ. We'd like to maintain the audience interactivity levels during this discussion, so please do submit questions for the speakers throughout the session using the Q&A feature of Zoom. And to moderate those questions and host the session, I'd now like to hand over to Michelle Hanna, who's a director at Cast Consultancy, who will be chairing this debate. Over to you, Michelle.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Bonnie, for the introduction. So welcome to today's session at Real Estate Live, which is, we're here to discuss a new era of construction. I have 5 great speakers who have joined me today to share how their respective organisations are embracing modern methods of construction and helping shift the mindset and how we build homes for the future. So we're going to go through a bit of introductions of each of our speakers, following which we'll have the opportunities, Bonnie said, to have some Q&A with our audience. Just before we go to those introductions, I think just to set the scene, I think we would all agree that the activity around modern methods of construction has grown and continues to grow over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's important to recognise what we mean when we talk about modern methods of construction. There is a lot of references to the way we built in the past and how different is what we're doing now. And I think it's important to recognise the innovation that is coming out of the new techniques and technologies that are being adopted by construction firms, developers, government agencies across the UK in helping to grow MMC. And we've had the creation of the MMC definitions framework, which has helped shape the different opportunities that are open to people, from volumetric construction in category 1 through to on-site innovation in category 7. So it is important we recognise it's more than just one way of doing things. There are a plethora of ways at which we are looking to deliver MMC. Before I go on, I'll just go through each of the panel members that are here today to join us. We have Richard Whitehead from Herts Innovation Quarter. We have Patsy Dell from Hertfordshire Growth Board. We have Grant Findlay from Sir Robert McAlpine, Jane Wakiwaka from the Crown Estate, and finally, but not least, Mark Doyle from Jarvis Builds. I'm going to allow each of them a bit of an opportunity to introduce themselves and a bit about how they're looking at modern methods of construction. Should we start with Richard? So Richard, Herts Innovation Quarter, how are you championing modern methods of construction, and how are you ensuring that the space and the initiatives provided by the Innovation Quarter are supporting the businesses based there?
Thank you, Michelle. And just to introduce myself, I'm Richard Whitehead. I'm the chair of Herts IQ. I also sit on the board of the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and I'm the managing director of ACOM's Buildings and Places business across Europe, which is a group of about 2,500 engineers, consultants and designers working in the built environment. We've been based in Hertfordshire quite a while. I've had a big office in St Albans since 1965, and obviously very proud to be part of the Hertfordshire construction community. Herts IQ is an enterprise zone. It's located just next to Hemel Hempstead off Junction 8 of the M1, designated an enterprise zone in 2017, and we're focused in 3 areas. We're focused at agri-tech, green technology, and then very relevant to this discussion, modern methods of construction and smart construction. The enterprise zone, or the Herts IQ, consists of a number of partners, St Albans and Decorum, along with Herts County Council and the LEP. And then 3 extra partners, BRE, Rothamsted and the University of Hertfordshire. All bring something special to the board, with BRE in particular bringing world-leading expertise in modern methods of construction. Now, as I say, one of our priorities is creating a centre of excellence for modern methods of construction. And as part of that, we've pulled together a construction cluster. And this brings together companies to drive collaboration, to drive innovation, and to drive growth in the sector. So companies ranging from startups and SMEs based in the BRE Open Innovation Hubs that were the creation of which was part funded by Herts IQ and the LEP, through to more established organisations like Stuart Mill Timber and Elements Europe. And so we brought those organisations together to innovate and to drive modern methods of construction, and they're excited about the collaboration opportunities that are there and the market opportunity there is in Hertfordshire. And that opportunity is significant, and we're further enhancing that opportunity by announcing today the creation of Hertfordshire Off-Site Manufacturing Programme. And this, again, will help drive modern methods of construction. It's a consortium, an informal consortium of 20 housing providers that are led by Watford Community Housing, the LEP, Herts IQ and Hertfordshire Growth Board. And we'll talk more about Hertfordshire Growth Board in a moment. And that group is committed to scaling up the use of offsite manufacturing to speed up the delivery of the 100,000 homes that we need to provide in Hertfordshire before 2036. So what we're doing is we're creating an environment, we're demonstrating a political will behind delivery of offsite manufacturing, and we're helping create that pipeline in Hertfordshire to allow companies to come here and to invest and to deliver on the exciting opportunity.
Thank you very much, Richard. Great introduction. I think that could take us nicely on to Patsy, and just going through how the Hertfordshire Growth Board is responding to the opportunities and challenges which Richard's kind of started to set out there for us.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Director for the Hertfordshire Growth Board. Just to say a little bit about what the Growth Board is and what it does. We like to think of it as the sweet spot where political leadership, business leadership and civic effort comes together in a place leadership body for Hertfordshire. So we have all the 11 councils, the district boroughs, the county council leaders on this statutory body, along with the chairman of the local enterprise partnership. And it's a body, it's been together since 2018. And its mission on behalf of those bodies is to really take that long-term place leadership perspective for Hertfordshire. We've got a common cause in dealing with delivery of good growth. We've got significant growth ambitions, 100,000 homes, as Richard said, and a similar number of jobs to deliver by the mid-2030s. We've got a significant amount of infrastructure we need to support that, and we need to really upscale the delivery of the homes that Hertfordshire needs. So it's a coming together, a body to give confidence to people investing in Hertfordshire that we have alignment of politics, civic effort and business, and really to advocate for Hertfordshire and to work together to deliver that good growth. So that's what the Growth Board is all about.
Thanks very much, Patsy. Next, we go to Grant from Sir Robert McAlpine. Grant, in your organisation, and how do you see the importance of modern methods of construction to the future of the sector? And what would be most important considerations for construction businesses in driving forwards more a sustainable, greener future?
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. Grant Findlay. I'm Group Strategy Director for Sir Rob McAlpine, which is proud to be based in Hertfordshire and Hemel Hempstead, right in the middle of the zone of smart construction. So looking forward to supporting that. First thing I wanted to say just very briefly is modern methods of construction are really not very modern. They've been around since the 1950s. And in fact, we worked on a prefabricated housing project in Hemel Hempstead in 1952. So as a business, lots of expertise of some of the things we talk about in terms of off-site manufacturing. I think the key there is that there is a lot of learning in the industry around modern methods and off-site manufacturing to build upon. And as you've already said, Michelle, there are many categories around MMC. It's not just about off-site manufacturing. I think for construction businesses, that means that just ignoring MMC because you don't do off-site manufacturing is a folly, is a dangerous position. And I think all businesses can participate on-site using techniques like lean construction, process improvement techniques, collaborative working, that sort of thing. So there's a space for MMC in all our businesses and activities. all MNC is, of course, underpinned by digital technology, and haven't we seen a transformation in the adoption of digital technology in our lives in the last 12 months? And no more so than in the construction business, where digital tools and techniques have become the sort of way we operate. In fact, the way we're operating today, of course, where we would normally be getting together and talking in one big room. So the digital adoption is really accelerated. I think for construction businesses, the key thing to keep an eye out for is client demand for MMC is accelerating. We've seen there's a battlefield of MMC businesses that have gone bust in the last 20 years, regrettably. These were really good businesses with innovative approaches, but just didn't have a pipeline of work to allow them to continue to operate. And I think increasingly, particularly with government as the largest buyer in the UK, having had a presumption in favour of MMC for a few years, but really, frankly, not having executed that, the issue of the construction playbook just before Christmas and the industry consultation that's gone into that, I'm really optimistic about the opportunity that will create for MMC and MMC adoption. I think we're also seeing a significant interest from the private sector and funders in MMC as a route to satisfying ESG funding and aligning broad public policy with funding. So increasingly, net zero carbon, social impact, levelling up MMC are becoming decisions that funders are making in terms of investing in private sector projects too. But I think for construction businesses, we need to change the way we work. We're going to have to disrupt the way we operate as a system of businesses in order to get the best out of MMC. We're going to need to break down that traditional silo thinking, and we need to create new sort of ecosystems where products and sub-assemblies can be manufactured by all sorts of small organisations around the country. But we need a set of rules for connectivity and interoperability to allow MMC to really be accelerated at pace. And our approaches in terms of how we deal with people and contracts, the collaborative approaches in terms of vertical integration across the project lifecycle with design and construction, and horizontal integration through the supply chain are going to be key to unlocking the value in MMC. But I'm very optimistic about MMC playing a really key part in the green future of the UK for all sorts of reasons that we can explore in the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Grant. That leads us nicely on to Jane and the Crown Estate. And as we know, the race to net zero is very important to the Crown Estate. It would be helpful if you could share with our audience how you as a business are promoting sustainable practices, particularly in terms of how you're ensuring your buildings are fit for the future.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jane Wakiwak, and I head up sustainability for the Crown Estate. And with respect to net zero, we recently publicly launched our net zero commitment, which is to make sure that we are committed to becoming a net zero carbon business by 2030 and climate positive thereafter. I think it's worth noting that we are a very diverse business. So we do obviously span real estate as well as other areas. But so for us, net zero is embedded into how we operate as a business. We have a responsibility to do more than just grow our financial returns. And we feel that net zero provides us with an incredible opportunity, not just in terms of the types of real estate that we manage and create, but also how we can support the UK's transition to becoming a low carbon economy. In terms of promoting sustainable practices across the business, what we're looking at doing is, one, we have a complete commitment endorsement from the top, and I think it's vital that we have senior leadership. And what we're looking to do is creating that community of practice across the organization. So it's not me as the head of sustainability delivering against our net zero ambition. This is a responsibility right across our business and our supply chain. I think in setting out our ambition, what we've been also quite clear on is that we don't have all of the answers. There's been a lot of mention about the need for collaboration, and for us, it's incredibly important that we collaborate right across our supply chain to help us deliver and help us kind of identify those answers. And we find that MMC will be an important aspect in how we deliver against this ambition. I think it's also important to know that we're not just, when we're talking about buildings that are fit for the future, we're not just creating buildings for the sake of creating buildings. We're trying to create destinations and places that people want to go to. And part of the processes that we kind of look to set out within, our documents like development sustainability principles is how do we look to really understand future customer, but also local community needs, and how does that help us shape the types of buildings and types of destinations that we want to create. And I think by having that sort of collaborative approach, that will help us to kind of ensure that our spaces remain relevant and fit for the future. And finally, for us as a developer landlord, it's about providing those opportunities to really kind of pilot and trial some of these techniques, whether they're for a small individual asset to a master plan, and again, just to kind of reinforce the need to collaborate very much with stakeholders and with supply chain to be able to deliver against our net zero ambition.
Thank you, Jane. That's really interesting. And again, it leads us quite nicely on to Mark in terms of the view from the contracting perspective. So, because Mark, is your organisation in the contracting side of things, how have you had to adapt your business over the last few years to respond to the changes that we're seeing in the construction sector, and particularly around climate change imperative? I guess it would be interesting to hear your view too from how your clients are responding to that agenda. Obviously, hearing from the Crown Estate side, and obviously you've got maybe a different area of clients. It'd be interesting to see how they're responding.
Yeah, brilliant. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, what great introductions from everyone, and it certainly makes you feel like Hertfordshire is a brilliant place to be and operate. And we're fortunate that we're based in Hertfordshire, and we have got really strong relationships within the whole of the county. A quick introduction to me. Mark Doyle, I head up Jarvis Contracting, as I've been introduced earlier. I've been in the construction industry for 39 years now, so I joined the industry before faxes were introduced and even before desktop PCs. So I've seen a lot of change in that time, but I think now is probably the most exciting period in my career of change. So just as you were asking, how have we adapted, particularly over the last 5 years or so? Well, as Grant said, MMC has been around a long time, and at the beginning of the noughties, we invested quite heavily in MMC, and unfortunately there was no traction at the time. It does feel now that there is a genuine collective will for change, and that's partly fueled by Brexit. So the country has gone through a whole change there. Grenfell has had a massive impact. There's multiple diversity campaigns raising that up the agenda quite rightly. Digitisation and the adverts you see for electric cars are constantly on there. Social mobility and particularly climate change, driven by the likes of David Attenborough, Bill Gates, and even Greta Thunberg, has really raised that up everyone's agenda. So that fits really, really well with our own corporate ethics. But the byproduct of that change is that it's making us a much sustainable business. And like all businesses have had to do over the past year in particular, we've had to recalibrate how we operate to work in a completely new way. Fortunately, we invested really heavily in digitisation about 5 years ago, and have continually had a programme of doing that to allow our workforce to be more agile. And believe me, looking back over the last 12 months, how grateful I am of doing that. And we've just committed to a 5-year partnership with a new digital partner to push us on again. And that digitisation in its own self has made us more sustainable. But over that 5-year period in particular, we have been re-exploring, I should say, sort of MMC and off-site manufacturing. And just to sort of emphasise the opening statements that you made, this is not just about modular construction and timber frame and just compartmentalised systems. This is beyond that. So we've got really strong partnerships with Stuart Milne, you've spoken about previously, and obviously the modular partner of Hertfordshire, Elements Europe, where we're starting to look at working with them. But we've been looking over the last 5 years at lots of different aspects of off-site manufacture, including ground solutions, plant room systems and the heating strategies, roofing systems, bathroom pods and kitchen pods, and also a focus on more sustainable on-site construction in how we recycle our waste materials. So we've got an initiative going on at the moment which demonstrates that there's an amazing statistic in the marketplace that 30% of all construction materials delivered to site are never used. So we have an initiative at the moment that we're really trying to drive down that waste. And if we can drive down that waste by being clever in how we actually sort of design buildings, order materials, take off materials, store them on site, and minimise damage on site, that we can actually drive down the waste there. But obviously there's a massive financial benefit associated to that. But we're in an environment at the moment where clients are actually looking for this. So it's imperative for us to be able to demonstrate that history that we've been trying to push on in this arena. And unfortunately, with the last 5 years or so, we've got demonstrable examples that it is something that we're really committed to. So for me, as sort of a business head, it's absolutely the right thing to do morally, but equally commercially. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this debate and, to see what everyone else feels.
Thank you, Mark. Right, shall we move on to some questions? I think we actually have a few questions from the audience, so if I pick up a couple of those first. Question from Stuart Scott. Looking forward, what does the pipeline look like in output levels year on year from 2022 onwards? I am assuming it's a specific question to around Hertfordshire. I'm hoping it is. Is there any view, Patsy, Richard, in terms of what you're seeing in terms of the engagement with MMC in the pipeline for housing?
So I could talk about the pipeline overall, if that'd be helpful. So we've talked about that big target for 100,000 homes to the mid-2030s. That translates to around 7,000 new homes a year is what's needed. We're not meeting that at the moment. I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's a big opportunity in there for MMC contribution to help speed up that delivery. And that's really what we're, I think, trying to help with by working with all those components and partners on the delivery pathway and in that pipeline. We've got, significant number of strategic sites, garden town, garden village, garden communities, town centre generation. We've got everything happening in Hertfordshire. So there are real opportunities for the industry to come in and help us increase that delivery rate. And, MMC is an obvious answer to try and speed up delivery in Hertfordshire.
Yeah. And Richard, if I just come on to you, because it's kind of a sub-question off the back of your announcement around the initiative partnership, again from Stuart Scott, in terms of what type of MMC is under consideration within this programme. I know you referenced the two manufacturing parts of that. So one of you want to talk a bit more about the types of MMC?
Yeah, I can. I just had one comment to the question Patsy eloquently answered there. We do have some schemes on site now in Hertfordshire that are using modular construction. So we are a consortium member is advancing modular construction projects right now. I guess the answer to the question is that the MMC in its fullest extent, and we have the obvious things that I've mentioned already happening with the modular construction and with timber construction with Elements Europe and with Stuart Mill Timber, but we also have obviously BRE as part of Herts IQ, who are right at the forefront of innovating in this sector. So we are looking at everything that you could imagine and driving everything you could imagine. A couple of the startups and SMEs that are homed in the BRE Innovation Hub are looking at flexible solar panels as an innovation there. We have an organisation there that's a specialist in minimising construction waste. So it's fullest extent, and that's our intention. Herts IQ is to be right at the front of that and drive it to its fullest extent.
Thanks, Richard. Right, next question. We have a question from Paul Jackson. Question for Grant and for Mark. What changes in procurement do you think are necessary from clients to maximise MMC delivery? In other words, not a single stage D&B, lowest cost wins.
That sounds like a good place to start. I can let me share an experience with you then. So we're working with Land Securities on a DFMA platform-based office building construction. Now that procurement route started in a normal competitive way, but it started on a very much a values-based procurement. So what the client was looking for was to find a partner who could come on board and work with them. And it probably touches one of the other questions about the role of the main contractor. Come and work with them as a manufacturing assembly manager, work with the design team, work with specialist suppliers, SMEs who've got innovative ideas to develop the overall solution from start to finish. So we ended up going from a short list of 8 to a long list of 8 to a short list of 3 or 4, and the client chose 2 contractors. So McAlpine are working in joint venture with Mace and providing manufacturing assembly solution to Landsec, and that job is on site now and delivering some pretty unique stuff, partly funded by Innovate UK. We have a grant, so we'll be sharing our sort of best practice from that project. So the answer is yes. It just simply focusing procurement on cost is not going to accelerate MMC adoption and find the right team, is my experience.
Mark, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I mean, exactly as Grant's saying, I think that there needs to be a little bit more intelligence from clients, and that's not meant to be patronising. What typically happens is that there's two areas where we're failing, I think, is that there definitely within Hertfordshire seems to be almost an insatiable appetite for MMC. However, what happens is that a scheme is typically put out to tender to contractors. And what happens is that scheme is already pretty much defined. So it's either been taken by the client to get a planning consent. It's typically been designed in a traditional format. So the tenderers are then asked to bid for that to provide the most competitive solution. So we're going to typically take the details that we've got to try and price against that, which is, as I say, is a traditional solution. Quite often we will offer an alternative form of construction as part of our bid, but then the time constraints to get that project to site often means that it's impossible to reverse that and then redesign it in either a modular or a timber frame solution. So I think, as Grant kind of alluded to with land security, sort of that early interaction with contractors will bring that attention much earlier in the process to make sure that a scheme is designed far more efficiently and is appropriate for MMC solutions. At the back end of the tendering process as well, clients are very fixated on bottom line, which is understandable. Now, MMC isn't always the most competitive option on a construction contract, but over the lifespan of that building, I'm pretty convinced that it will be the most optimum cost for that landlord client. So it's having an appreciation that it's an investment over a period of time, not just on a lowest price.
No, completely agree with that. Long-term focus has absolutely got to be the priority rather than short-term capital gains. Okay, there's another question here around the role of main contractors. So the question to the panel is, does the panel think that the rapid growth of MMC will result in the current role of main contractors being less relevant in favour of things like construction integration or construction managers? I wonder, Jane, from a client perspective, developer perspective, do you see the role of main contractors changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a general sort of observation, real estate is going through quite a lot of disruption right now. So I think it's not saying that the main contractor role is redundant, but I think what we're going to see is that those contractors that are most agile to responding to some of the external trends are going to be the ones that will be here for the long term. And I think, picking up on some of the comments that Grant made, for example, we're definitely seeing the way that we're engaging with contractors, particularly very early on in the design process, is something that perhaps we haven't seen in the past. So I think it's just that I think that the relationship is going to change. And I think the way that things like technology, et cetera, will continue to disrupt the sector will mean that the main contractors will also have to adapt to those changes.
Mark, Grant, do you either have any views or thoughts around how that plays out? I mean, it is a bit of a different approach for a client to take in terms of they would be taking more control that way, which from a client perspective sometimes is seen as too risky.
Yeah, if I can kick off and then Grant, perhaps if you're happy to backfill. I think certainly we operate with a lot of the HA clients amongst Hertfordshire, and in the past, there's been a real trust issue with contractors, and I think that the long-term relationships that we're establishing, and many of the local contractors as well are establishing, is building that. There has to be a leap of faith, and there's no reason why any relationship still can't be market tested, and certainly the frameworks that we have in place within Hertfordshire allow that early contractor engagement. As far as contractors having to modify or being redundant, MMC doesn't work for every single site. And even on every single site, it might be that MMC is only appropriate for 80% of the site. And so there does need to be the intelligence of a main contractor to try and make things work. And MMC is a proportion of the build. Obviously, it's structure, so it's a large proportion of the build. But there's contracting or construction is a pretty sophisticated business. It doesn't seem that from the outside, but it is in modern day contracting. And then there is a lot of regulations and guidance that we have to follow. Do you want to pick up on any more, Grant?
Just a couple of things. I think I definitely see a move towards that integrator role, but I think it's Jane's point of just being more agile and adaptable. And I don't think it's fundamentally changing the skills that a main contractor brings in terms of logistics management, production management are still the key skills that a manufacturing and assembly manager role I'd need to have. I think the key thing, the point you made, Michelle, about risk, that's important because under the arrangement we have with Landsec, it's effectively a construction management contract, so the risk does rest with the client. Now, that's a big step for an organisation to take, but they want to take that risk on this particular scheme because they want to understand all the costs and all the outputs so that they can inform their next scheme. So therefore, that's an appropriate position to take. And also, we're developing new techniques and technologies and new MMC techniques that there's currently no warranty for. So we're having to work out how do we warrant these things. And no main contractor would be happy to put a sort of design and build wrapper around that at this moment in time. So that intelligent client approach that's been taken is really helping to drive collectively the whole supply chain's understanding of how to make this work.
Yeah, and I guess just that kind of wraps into it the importance of the collaboration that's come as a common theme throughout the discussion to this point, and the need for that early engagement. And I always think of the construction industry or development as client going out and buying the site, getting the planning application, then going finding a contractor, then building it, and then getting someone to live there. And it's like all those parts can't be looked at in isolation. So bringing that contracting team up front into the conversations through the planning process can only be helpful in mitigating a client's risk if they want to take control through the construction process and take on that risk. But it's like there's no point in doing it if you're going to isolate the parts.
I think from my analogy, Michelle, is it's more like sailing a yacht than doing a relay race. It's not baton handing. It's everyone on the yacht's got and I'm not a sailor, I've done it once or twice, but everyone's got a job to do. And there's points at which everyone's the most important person on that yacht. And that's how good project teams work.
Yeah, completely agree. Should we move on to quite a few questions now? Next question is, how do you see MMC used to help regenerate town centres? Patsy, Richard, have you got any thoughts around this?
Happy to start. I mean, we see this as having a real role to play. We need to be artful in thinking about how we deal with our town centre regeneration going forward and their role, particularly post-COVID. And I think it needs all the thinking and creativity of the sector to be thinking about the future of high streets, but working together. So you were talking about, the need for everyone's part to be played in this. And I think that really spreads across the public sector as well. We need planning teams, building control. We all need to pull our part of the picture together up front, upstream, to be setting and supporting the circumstances to enable these things to happen and these opportunities to come forward. We have a big role, thinking of Hertfordshire County Council, to play in extra care accommodation delivery. We've got major assets and major interest in seeing these places regenerated and come forward and being sustainable for future population. So we've all, as Grant said, a really important role to play in this picture.
Yeah. Richard, anything you'd like to add?
I would add, I guess, just one thing. I mean, we obviously our intention, Hertfordshire, to really drive the growth in the construction centre of excellence, and part of that is about building on the skills that we've got and then retaining those skills in Hertfordshire, and that will have a positive impact in the communities and the town centres by growing that skill base. So
yeah. No, completely. The skill set is probably one of the most fundamental bits that we do need to focus on growing and developing. Next question is around current investments, that have been made to ensuring the supply chain and their teams become competent in delivering MMC. And this is something that I've discussed earlier on with the panel, but it'd be interesting to get your views on whether or not the current investments you're aware of, but perhaps also investments that should be made going forward by government or others. Is any Mark or Grant from the supply chains you work with, if there's anything you've seen at the moment?
Yeah, I think the thing is that it's been driven top down pretty much, and it's largely client driven as far as MMC and the use of any OSM components. The supply chain needs to be involved in that. Yeah. There needs to be some sort of incentive for our subcontractors to move towards sort of OSM practices that are safer, maybe more sustainable. And they might be more costly. That's one of the issues that's probably the really biggest barrier to supply chain commitment, or even a lack of understanding. So I think there's a whole sort of tutorial part around that, engaging with our supply chain to push them forward in directions that that they traditionally might not be used to, and that's typically what construction used to be about. There used to be a progression from being on the tools, as the phrase used to be, to working up to site management, and then eventually to maybe higher positions. And it's trying to break that chain. And with more people coming through university as graduates, I think we have now got an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think the training, because with the training with SMEs, I mean, the cost of investing in training in an individual, for that individual to then leave and go somewhere else, it can be quite onerous on a business, and that kind of deters from actually making that investment. So there needs to be something along setting a training platform that actually helps the supply chains.
Oddly, I think the cost of training is only part of it. So it's the loss of a day's production from that.
Exactly, yes.
That's the biggest. We've found that that's probably the biggest barrier. We've encouraged our supply chain to take part, to participate in our own training programs, but it's that loss of days production and paying that individual to train that's one of the barriers.
Yeah. Grant, would you like to add
anything? I think there's an intent in the government's industrial strategy to try and do the right things by the supply chain and SMEs across the country. I don't think it's always landing well or working well, but I think Construction Innovation Hub and Innovate UK, Homes England have all got programs in place to accelerate learning and training. I mean, a couple of shout outs for the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and CITB have got a couple of funded projects to provide free digital strategy training to businesses and lean construction training. So those are available to any construction employer who pays the levy. So there are some things out there which people can pick up for no cost, but I think there's still lots to do, Michelle.
Yeah, no, agree. Next question, Harry, we're okay for time. So next question, okay. So Herts is uniquely fortunate in having a well-resourced building control company owned by 8 of the 10 councils. Hertfordshire Building Control has aligned itself to the MMC offsite sector and has partnerships with several companies operating in it. We're passionate about the quality of housing that will be built in our county to deal with the current shortage. I feel there are some stars in alignment here. How do we best get the word out to the relevant decision makers to talk to us before using a private sector service? Richard, Patsy, would that be one you'd like to pick up?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of make a general comment on that. I think it's exactly that. It's getting the word out at events like this. Talking about the capabilities that are there, the role that organisation is playing in delivering our 100,000 homes over the next 15, 20 years. So it's just that. It's events like this. I would say.
Yeah. I'll pick up with Trevor afterwards.
Well, there you go, it's done. Fantastic. Right, next question. The next question is just an add on the pipeline in terms of housing, in terms of the mix. So 7,000 units per year, what does it look like in terms of low and high rise housing? Which is a back question.
I can give you a answer on that. I mean, it's a total mix. So if you think about, Hertfordshire's polycentric character, you've got, things happening, Harlow, Gilston, Garden Town, Hemel Garden communities, Watford Junction Quarter regeneration, Stevenage Town Centre regeneration. You've got village sites. We've got everything happening in that broad mix of place, representative of the kind of characteristics of Hertfordshire. So it's everything from low rise to, we've got 20-storey development happening in Watford now. So there's everything to play for in Hertfordshire.
And there is another kind of sub-question onto that in terms of the Hertfordshire home and what it would look like post-June 2022. The new Part L, future home standard, would that be incorporated into the homes? Is there any thoughts around that as part of the partnership initiative that's been announced in terms of what the homes should be striving to deliver?
It's quite a technical question.
Yeah, it's a very technical question.
I guess my comment on that would be, we have the skills in Hertfordshire to answer that question. My own organisation, AECOM in St Albans, was heavily involved in the drafting of Part L regulations back in the 90s. BRE are central to those regulations. So, as it becomes clearer what they're going to be, we have the skills to solve the problems.
I assume that the driver will be is the homes delivered through this initiative will be better quality, more sustainable homes, and that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of what can government do to drive adoption by energy efficiency, because we all know modern methods of construction have improved. Has improved energy efficiency. Yeah. So we'll be delivering at best practice in Hertfordshire.
Then there's a question which is a kind of a sub-question to what we've previously answered. What help is on offer to help smaller developers to use MMC with their own setups and to really help encourage widespread adoption? Or is this too early to try focus on this for the sub 10 million development companies? And I think we obviously picked on the training, but is there anything else in terms of how local smaller SMEs can engage in MMC within Hertfordshire?
Yeah, I would. I mentioned this in my introduction. I think that's the smart construction cluster that we have within Herts IQ. I would encourage anyone to reach out to that. It brings together communities of small and large and medium construction companies to collaborate, innovate, and to grow. So we did that deliberately for those three reasons. So I would suggest reaching out to the Smart Construction Cluster, details which you can find on our website by Googling Herts IQ.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next question, we've still got a couple more. The market is changing regarding insurers are getting cautious with regards to the use of timber within the fabric, and the height may be reduced further down from 11 metres. Although timber is the most sustainable material, how will this be addressed? Is there any thoughts around, Mark, Grant, how you're approaching, Jane, how you're approaching buildings and the construction materials you use with the eye on sustainability, but knowing anything higher than a certain height won't be able to use timber?
Yeah, I think it's horses for courses, and it's a pragmatic view on what's the best form of construction. Part L, Part B, we have the ability to make sure that we can comply with that. That there is obviously the changes to Part L are still a little bit up in the air, but it's just sort of intuitive design and making sure that we select the right forms of construction. Yeah. Timber frame has moved on dramatically, and fire protection within buildings is obviously very, very high up the agenda, and we're all aware of the changes that are likely to happen post-Grenfell.
Yeah. Jane, is there any construction materials that you as a business have been looking at that may exclude the need to use timber but could be considered more sustainable?
Sorry, I kind of cut out from it. Did you say the use of
without the use of timber? So I've seen some buildings looking at forms of low cement concrete, not proven and tested, but it's looking at ways that we can improve the carbon footprint of our buildings without having to rely on timber, as it is naturally perceived to be the most sustainable. Is there anything else you've been considering?
Yeah, so we have absolutely been looking at things like low carbon concrete and what are the opportunities. It's absolutely not a one size fits all, but it's something that we're having to consider more and more because of the relative importance that embodied carbon up to PC is having. I think that there is the note on insurers, it is something that we're kind of mindful of as well, and working very closely with our insurers, but also our in-house sort of health and safety and insurance guys as well. So it's making sure that we're taking a bit of a multifaceted approach to understanding where some of the risks may be in relation to the use of some of these materials.
Yeah, I think that's sorry.
I just make a comment. I mean, you'll see there's been a very understandable reaction to Grenfell and the changes in the guidelines, and have been, I think, responded to quite conservatively, as you would imagine, as you'd expect. A lot of organisations are literally petrified of combustible materials in their facades. But I do think that will settle down. I do think that there will be with timber buildings are completely safe with oversizing, with active fire strategies, so that there is there'll be a response and a more mature view taken with time. Would be my view.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. One barrier is the lack of knowledge share. How can we encourage data share on building performance materials without damaging the competitive advantage of main contractors? This is a really good question. One of my biggest bugbears is we don't have enough data and to understand where the main issues and challenges lie. And it's like, how do we harness that data and collaboratively share it?
I mean, from the contractor's perspective, we sit on a couple of the frameworks within Hertfordshire. I'd like to think that they're genuinely collaborative. I've even sat with forums where we were looking at MMC before. There's parts of the advice that some of the local HA clients were looking at as far as looking to set up the off-site manufacturing partnerships. So we sat there with our contractor competitors, and we gave a contractor's perspective. And it did include early contractor involvement. But there is a relatively open dialogue between a lot of the Hertfordshire-based contractors. We're really fortunate that this is a great place to operate. And as Patsy was saying, that there is a really healthy pipeline of opportunity there for us that, no contractor can service it all. So, exactly. It's smart and intelligent for us to share knowledge between contractors. And equally, that data, I think, is there without compromising competitive advantage.
And I think things, Richard, in terms of the housing associations that you're bringing together, I think that in part will allow the sharing of data between those organisations. Yeah.
Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
I'll mute there. One of the purposes of the offsite manufacturing program with the consortium is to come together and to work together to deliver, share that knowledge and share that expertise, and for the benefit of all.
Then we've got a question around London properties. So given the structure of most of the London properties with limited space around sites and difficulty in getting things like modular units into tight streets along the way, what do the panel see the options for inside big cities? I assume this is in terms of MMC, that's not necessarily modular housing, which I think we've covered is not the only solution. But any thoughts around constraint sites?
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, volumetric pods, large volumetric spaces are not the right sort of thing to be trailing through the middle of London. So that's where, and you referred to at the outset, Michelle, the MMC framework that sets out the 7 categories. We go straight down into sort of small components, modular, so kit apart types approach. So we do use modular elements within most of our projects in central London, and in fact. The offices that most of the main contractors are building in central London now have pre-manufactured value of 60% plus in terms of, that's the kind of, and that's before you start doing anything non-standard. That's just standard levels of pre-manufactured value. So I think there are solutions, but as I say, probably not transporting big volumetric spaces into the centre of town.
Great. Question around sustainability. Jane, you could pick this on. What are the top things that the industry can do to become more sustainable?
That's a massive question.
So it's like a whole session just for that question.
I mean, coming from it, I guess from a client perspective, I mean, I think, I don't know how to sort of like answer this really. I mean, I would definitely kind of going back to some of the comments around, I think collaboration, et cetera, I think is going to be key, because what we need to try and do is, there's a danger that things could become quite fragmented, and I think making sure that we're aligning with various industry. There's a lot of fantastic industry bodies that are doing a huge amount in sustainability, but what we want to try and do is make sure that we're all kind of collaborating and working together. And just to kind of give you an example of some of the stuff that we're doing around embodied carbon, we've really actually struggled as a business to try and articulate and define some of the standards around embodied carbon, just because there's so much out there. And what we've been really pushing for is to make sure that all of these bodies are working together, but also for us to be sharing what we're understanding and learning with our industry peers. I mean, another sort of example of sort of what we're doing is by when we signed up to our net zero commitment, we joined some of the industry sort of frameworks that exist, like the BBP climate change commitment. And that means that we're working very collaboratively with all of the sort of the top UK REITs and investors that are out there. So, I mean, I would just say that at a very high level, that would be what I would be looking to do. But it's quite, and kind of getting that consensus, I think, is, and driving that consensus, I think, is going to be key.
Yeah. Thanks, Jane. I mean, it is quite a big question. So we've got one other question here in terms of, would you be looking to a framework like Oxford Council, which is the MMC framework? So I think Oxford Council's got its own framework that it launched back end of last year for its own, for organisations that work within Oxford City Council. Is that something Hertfordshire would look at doing with developers or other organisations?
So, Michelle, I think Oxford and Oxfordshire benefited from a growth and housing deal with government. So they have significant support there. That's something we'd really like to achieve for Hertfordshire. Yeah. And we would obviously, then have the ability to be driving a contract at scale and would want to do that. But, we will continue to make that case to government. Yeah. We'll look at the opportunities with our stockholding councils' own development programmes to see how we can join them up and chunk development in a greater size, get more bang for the buck of our contracts and approaches wherever we can.
Thank you.
There's a pseudo sort of framework already with some of the construction partners that Richard mentioned.
Yes.
So certainly on sort of at the high level on modular and timber frame, there are partners. We're working with Stuart Mill as a timber frame partner through one of the frameworks to deliver a scheme for St Albans at the moment. And again, St Albans brought us in very early on that one to optimise that scheme, which we have done. It's only a relatively small scheme, but we've enhanced the number of homes on that by about 40%.
Yeah, and I think the point around partnership, which was referenced quite early on in our discussion around, we have a responsibility to make sure the manufacturing or any supply chain that is serving this new type of delivery is a sustainable business. So, in terms of creating these partnerships and these program of opportunities helps us create that investment back into the industry, because without that, I think Grant, you'd reference it, people will go bust. And there is no point in us setting up new businesses and creating new platforms to enhance pipelines within factories, etc., if they're just going to go bust. So it's about that collaboration together, which is, again, as I said earlier, clearly a common theme running through our discussion. I'm conscious we have like 5 minutes left, and I do want to wrap up with one question. So I think what we're going to do is the questions that are remaining, we will come back to those and kind of send a response back through the messenger system. But just to close us off, because it's been a fantastic discussion, I think it's gone for another hour, really. It's been really interesting. But to just close out, if I could just ask each of you a question just in terms of going forward. I have a question that I've actually put together. So what do you think will be the most important factor in bringing forward new methods of construction over the course of this year and next year and going forwards? What is the one thing that will drive this real change? Who should we start with first? Shall we start with, go different order? Shall we start with Grant first?
Thanks, Michelle. That means no one else can steal my answer.
Okay, but they also get time to think about it. So just the one thing.
Building confidence. I think a positive narrative from government and clients about and those who have benefited from it about the value that comes from M&C in driving productivity and value improvement is a must, with good real life case studies and examples.
Yeah, brilliant. Mark.
Similar sort of theme. I think early collaboration with the supply chain, and that'd be contractor and specialist off-site manufacturers to really drive value for a project, rather than try to retrospectively fit it into a scheme that's already got consent.
Sounds like Jane.
Problem coming third. I would agree with early collaboration. I think probably investment as well. We just need to make sure we're investing.
Yeah. Patsy?
Probably a similar theme to everybody, but I think it's making the components that we need in this delivery pipeline, delivery pathway work together. And that collaborative effort to do that.
And finally, Richard.
So the danger of going last is all your good ideas have gone before you. I would add innovation, continuing to drive innovation. Hugely important.
Completely agree with all those points. It's been a really interesting discussion. I mean, definitely a clear theme across the collaboration, as I said, but shifting the mindset. I think it's very clear that we all have a responsibility to do something different and work towards a more sustainable delivery pipeline going forward. And again, it comes back down to it's about thinking about the long term and not the short term. But yes, thank you all so much for your time. It's been really great chatting through this with you. So I've passed back to Bonnie after I say thank you very much to our audience. It's been really great having you.
Great, thanks. Michelle, and thank you so much to our panel. That session covered so many angles on this topic with some great examples of how Hertfordshire's driving the MMC agenda. And it was great to see so many questions coming up from the audience, really keeping you all on your toes. So hopefully we can carry on this conversation in our June event. Looking ahead, audience, we would be delighted to see you tuning into one or two other sessions today. The details of the events we've got coming up are now on your screen, and you can find them on our website. Just to run through them, we have two more coming up. A panel looking at the outlook for independent businesses in 2021 with a focus on the Borough of Kingston in partnership with Aviva Investors. And then later on today, a panel looking at imaginative placemaking with Argent, Westminster Council, We Are Placemaking and Stockton Council. So you might have seen the news about their plans to demolish half the town centre high street and replace it with a riverside park. So that's definitely an interesting one to have a watch of. And yeah, both of them are set to be brilliant discussions. So hopefully everyone can tune into one or both of those if you've got a free afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you again either later today or when we return in June. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.